Hello students, welcome to the YouTube channel Facts in Biology. I myself, Anand Joshi, a teacher in biology. I am constantly attempting to provide you with all the latest information about the NEET examination, the content which is required for it, and definitely the method of examination. If you find these videos helpful for your studies, please subscribe, like and share them so that students like you can get benefited. Friends, today we are going to discuss a very important topic in sexual reproduction in angiosperm. Already we have studied the development of male gametophyte as well as female gametophyte. And today we are going to discuss pollination. Now pollination, it is well said about the pollination is that if all the type of pollinators like bee, they are destroyed, if they become extinct within few years, entire earth will be barren, it will be destroyed, and all the biological communities will be destroyed from the earth. So in that context, it is very important ecologically. Basically, if we see reproduction in angiosperm, it involves formation of megaspore and pollen grains. Pollen grains are produced in androecium and megaspore is produced within the ovule. And both the gametes in angiosperm, they are non-motile. And definitely pollen grains being non-motile, angiospermic plant have to develop some strategy to use abiotic agents like wind, water and biotic agents like birds, insects and snails and variety of others to pollinate the flowers. Now basically what is pollination? Pollination is the transference of pollen grain from anther to the receptive stigma of gynoecium of the same flower or the different flower or present on the same mother plant or different mother plant. The process is called as pollination. It is a multifactual definition. You will understand it once again. Pollination is the transference of pollen grain from anther to the receptive stigma of gynoecium of the same or different flower present on same or different mother plant. The process is called as pollination. Now pollination is definitely most important one, prerequisite for fertilization, because in angiosperm both male and female gamete, as we have already discussed, they are non-motile. As we see, the pollen grains are non-motile, they are usually carried from flower to flower by using some external pollinating agencies. Generally, they are referred as external agents. Moreover, the gametes are produced at two different sites, that is androecium in the male and gynoecium of the female. These are the site for production of the male gametes as well as female gametes. As far as the pollination is concerned, it is chiefly divided into two major types. The first one, it is called as self-pollination, and the second one, it is called as cross-pollination. Now here you can see the definition of self-pollination. It is a transference of pollen grain from anther to the receptive stigma of gynoecium of the same flower or a different flower present on same mother plant. Mind it well, either the flower is same or two flowers, but they must be present on the same mother plant. In that condition, we can call it as a self-pollination. Obviously, this self-pollination, it will result into inbreeding, or it is called as selfing in biology, as there is no involvement of unknown or the third partner, or we can say there is no chances of foreign pollen grain. It is compulsorily resulting into inbreeding or selfing. Now cross-pollination, it can be defined as the transference of pollen grains from anther to the receptive stigma of gynoecium of another flower present on different plant but belonging to same species. Very importantly, belonging to same species, and this pollination can be further divided into three major types depending upon the source of pollination. Now, what are these sources? If we see the process of pollination, here you can see this is a single plant, and if the transference of pollen grain within the same flower, it is self-pollination, or another flower present on the same mother plant, again it is a self-pollination. But if the pollen grains are transferred from one flower to another flower present on another mother plant, then it is said to be the cross-pollination. So in self-pollination, either a single flower or a single plant is involved, and in cross-pollination, two flowers present on two different mother plants, they are involved. Now as far as the self-pollination is concerned, it can be further divided into variety. Number one, it is autogamy. Many a time it is equivalent to self-pollination. It is a type of pollination in which bisexual flower is containing gynoecium as well as androecium is pollinated by its own pollen grains, and offspring which are produced, they are genetically identical clones to their parents. And usually autogamy, we observe it in the pea plant. That is the best example of explaining autogamy. The second one is called as gitanogamy. Now what is gitanogamy? It is a transfer of pollen grain to a stigma of a different flower present on the same mother plant. Different flower present on the same mother plant, it will result into gitanogamy. It is functionally similar to cross-pollination technically, as it involves pollinating agents. But genetically, both the gametes are same. That's why it is included in the self-pollination. Maximally, it is found in the plants belonging to Cucurbitaceae. One example we can have Cucurbita maxima, where the two flowers present on same mother plants are involved. The third, in addition to that, we can say it is similar to autogamy of pollen grains, as they come from the same same plant, but it cannot bring about genetic variation and is only of ecological significance. Only it is ecologically important. Otherwise, genetically there are no variations. That's why it is not given much importance. Xenogamy is the third type. Many times it is considered as equivalent to the cross-pollination, and or we can call it as an outbreeding. It is a type of cross-pollination when pollen grains of one flower is deposited on the stigma of flower of different plant belonging to same species. With the help of some pollinating agencies, compulsorily two different plants or the flower present on two different plants, they are considered here. It is responsible for producing genetically different varieties or varied offsprings, as we can say the exchange of genetic material, it is occurring here. Majority of flowering plants, they depend upon the transfer of pollen grain, because we know the variations, they are forming the basis of organic evolution. So obviously this is the method where more chances of variation, more chances of evolution are there. Virtually all the seed plants, they are required to be pollinated. Compulsorily they require the pollination. Most of the food and fiber crops grown throughout the world depends upon the pollinator for their successful sexual reproduction. Then if we see the mechanism or the agencies for pollination, they are referred as pollinating agents. The agents that are responsible for pollination have been grouped into two major categories. The first one, they are called as abiotic agents, and the second one, they are called as biotic agents. As far as abiotic agents are concerned, they include only two. The first one, wind, obviously, and the second one is water. As far as the wind and water pollination is there, we'll see in detail. The first one, it is pollination by wind. It is referred as anemophily. In Latin, anemo means wind and phily means marriage. So marriage with the help of wind, it is anemophily. Most of the important crop plants, they are wind pollinated. These include the wheat, rice, corn, rye, barley, and even the oats. And additionally, you can remember palm plants, they are also wind pollinated, and this is one we can say photograph that will show the flowers of wind pollinated plants. Now what are the speciality of these wind pollinated anemophilous flower? We'll see as an adaptation for anemophily or anemophilous flowers. Generally, the flowers with anemophily, they are small in size, inconspicuous, very smaller in size, colorless, without nectar and fragrance, as these are not required for attracting pollinating agents. The pollen grains are light in weight, that can be driven with the wind. Even the small breeze can drive them away. They are dry and produced in large number to increase the chances of pollination considering the wastage of pollen grain. So wastage of pollen grain is a major issue here, but to overcome that, number of pollen grains are more. Additionally, the stigma, here you can see the stigma, they are feathery. Why? Because they can easily trap the pollen grain which are moving away with the wind, and definitely that will help to attract them, definitely that will help to catch them from the wind. Now stamens, if you observe, these are very special. They are intended, they are exerted on very long filaments, and the anther is very special. It is versatile. Versatile means it is the attachment of anther and filament is like this. And these anther, they can move in this direction with the wind, or even they can move in the opposite direction like this. So this movement as well as this movement is possible, and that's why they are considered as a versatile anther. And stigma or stamen, they are exposed to air current, and definitely that will help to transfer the pollen grains. The another variety, it is called as hydrophily or water pollination. Pollination with the help of water. It is only found in some 30 genera of aquatic monocots. Generally, it is found in the monocot plants that include Vallisneria, Zostera, as well as you can have Ceratophyllum. Here you can have the Zostera plant that is shown in the photograph. Now if we see the basic adaptation that are shown by hydrophilous flower, the flowers are once again, they are very small, inconspicuous. They are truly very small because they are not requiring the larger size. Attractive devices are not required. If at all present, calyx and corolla, they are replaced by perianth. And if other whorls are present, they are unwettable so that they become waterproof. They are not getting decomposed in contact with water. Pollen grains are long and unwettable due to presence of mucilage. The pollen grains are always surrounded by a mucilaginous film. The nectar and fragrance, they are not required at all, as the bees or insects are not to be attracted. Definitely nectar and fragrance is not required. Then if we see the hydrophily, it can be further divided into two types. The first one is called as Hypo Hydrophilic. Hypo means below, hydrophily means water pollination. Water pollination below the surface of water, it is called as Hypo Hydrophily. The pollination that occurs below the surface of water is called as Hypo Hydrophily. Here the pollen grains are heavier than water. They sink down and caught by the stigma of female flowers. Generally, it is observed in the plants like Zostera. Zostera is famous as seagrass. The pollen grains are long, ribbon-like, and they are showing absence of exine. Exine is not present, only intine is there. The second variety is there. It is called as Epihydrophily. Epi means above, hydrophily, that is water pollination. So, pollination above the surface of water, it is called as epihydrophily. The pollen grain float on the water surface and reach the stigma of female flower. In Vallisneria, submerged dioecious freshwater aquatic plant in which female flowers reach the water surface temporarily to ensure pollination, and male flower float on the surface of water. Here you can see the male flower is there. They are, we can say, floating around the female, and definitely whenever the female flower is come in contact with the male flower, exchange of pollen grain will be there, and there will be the process of fertilization. If we see the specific gravity of these pollen grain, they are equal to the water, so that it becomes easier for them to float on the surface of water. Some aquatic plants, they are anemophilous also. Mind it well, the plants are aquatic, but they are pollinated with the help of anemophily, that is with the help of wind. And the most common example is Potagamon, or we can say it is Potamo giton plant, which is shown here. The flowers are shown here. Or another example is, it is Halogaris. They are the anemophilous aquatic plant. It is very important for your NEET preparation. Another example we can have, some aquatic plants, they are pollinated with the help of insects. That is entomophily. You can have very common example in the form of lotus, even water hyacinth and water lilies. Here you can see the water lilies, and this is the lotus plant, that are aquatic plants, but they are pollinated with the help of insects. Another factor is biological agent, or they are the biotic agent. Now biotic agents, they include living agents, and about 80% of the plant, they require help of the living moving creatures such as insects, birds, bats, snails, or even we can say a variety of other living organisms are used. Now, these are also responsible for sustaining our ecosystem and produce natural resources for helping the plants to reproduce. So, biotigation, these are the most important one for organic evolution also. In that biotigation, we can have the first one in the form of insect pollination, also referred as entomophily, and it is generally observed in the plants like rose, jasmine, or even sistrum. Now these plants, they show some adaptation for entomophily, and what are these? Number one, the flowers are large, showy, and often brightly colored, because these insect pollinator will get attracted towards the attractive coloration, and that's why all the beautiful colors of the flowers are produced only for attracting the pollinating agent. The flowers also produce large sweet odor or smell, and they have nectar gland. Now another factor attracting the insect, obviously it is the smell. Sensation of smell is very strong in insect. So we can have the smell, that is odor, that is aroma, which is produced from the flower, and additionally they can have nectar gland for nectar. We know the honeybees are going to visit the flowers. The stigma of such flower, it is rough due to presence of hair, or it is sticky due to mucilaginous secretions, so that with the single visit of the insect, many pollen grain can get attached. The pollen grains are spiny and surrounded by a yellow sticky substance called as pollen kit. Remember, the exine of such entomophilous pollen grain, it is sticky, it is having yellow sticky substance called as pollen kit. Some of the plants, they have special adaptation for insect pollination, and they are having the special mechanism like lever mechanism that is found in the salvia plant. It is also called as turnpike mechanism. Here, if the insect is going to sit, land, definitely this is the region of androecium which is going to touch the body of insect, and on the body of insect the pollen grains are shaded, and along with the next visit, with the next flower, the pollen grains can be shifted. So lever mechanism or turnpike mechanism, it is found in salvia. It is a special adaptation for entomophily. Then if we see the second mechanism, it is a pollination with the help of birds, that is called as ornithophily. Only a few types of birds are specialized for pollination. They usually have small size and long beaks like honeybirds, sunbirds, or even the hummingbirds. Some ornithophilous plant, they include bombax, or we can have callistemum, or we can have bottlebrush or butia. These are the commonly bird pollinated plants. If we see the adaptation which are shown by the bird pollinated plant, the flowers are usually brightly colored, large and showy for attracting the birds. They secrete profuse dilute nectar, that is main objective of the birds to visit the flower. Pollen grains are sticky and spiny, very easily they are getting stuck to the beaks of the birds, and flowers are generally without fragrance as birds have poor sense of smell. So no requirement of the nectaries, but definitely they are attractively colored and more amount of, we can say copious amount of the nectar is produced. Then pollination with the help of bat, that is the third type. It is also called a chiropterophily. Now bats can transport pollen grain over very long distance, many times some several kilometers. So bats are also pollinators. Now for bats, special mechanism is developed by the flower. The flowers are generally dull color, as at the night they are pollinated. They don't require attractive coloration. Energy is saved, but strong fragrance is required for attracting the bats. They secrete abundant nectar. Flowers produce large amount of edible pollen grains. Many times these flowers, they produce rotten flesh-like smell, which are very important for attracting the bats. The most common example of chiropterous plant are Anthocephalus, we call it as a kadamba tree, or Adansonia, that baobab tree, or Kigella pinnata, that is sausage tree. These are the examples of chiropterous flowers. Now, additionally, the plants, angiospermic plant, they also show outbreeding devices. They are called as contrivances. Now, these outbreeding devices, they are responsible for favoring one type of pollination and avoiding another type of pollination. Many of the plants have mechanism that discourage or prevent self-pollination. To promote cross-pollination and increase genetic diversity, plants have evolved a wide variety of sexual strategies. One by one we will see them. The first one, the genetic diversity is essential factor for evolution, for natural selection, and continued cell pollination will result into inbreeding depression. As a result of that, quality of the offspring, genetical quality of the offspring may drop down. Thus, the plants have developed many devices to encourage cross-pollination and prevent self-pollination. The examples of outbreeding devices we are going to see one by one. The first one, it is unisexuality. In case the plant bears either the male or female flower only. Now in that condition we call them as a dioecious plant. Here you can have the most common example of maize plant, and here you can have male flower, and the down we can say towards the surface we can have the female flower. So the flowers are unisexual, either male or female, and in that condition they are called as dioecious flower. As flowers are unisexual, self-pollination is 100% avoided. Plants may be monoecious like maize, or even we can say dioecious plant like mulberry. In case of maize, single plant may produce male and female flower at different location, and in mulberry and papaya they may produce the same, we can say, at the different positions. The second example is dichogamy. In this mechanism, anthers and stigma, they mature at different times, so that the flower being bisexual is unable to self-pollinate. Definitely the flower is bisexual, but the maturity time of male and female whorls, they are differing, so that self-pollination become impossible. It can be further divided into two categories. The first one is called as protandry. Now very easily you can understand, prota means first, andry means androecium. In this type, androecium mature first, earlier than the gynoecium. So the way androecium is ready, pollen grains are ready, the gynoecium is not ready. As a result of that, self-pollination is avoided, cross-pollination becomes the rule. Here you can have the self-pollination. It is, we can say, resulted due to the inability or immaturity of the female whorl. Here you can have the example in the form of disc florate of sunflower. They will support protandry. The second mechanism we can have protogyny. As the name indicates, proto means first, gyne means gynoecium. In this mechanism, gynoecium mature earlier than the androecium. The gynoecium is ready to receive the pollen grain, but the androecium, they are not ready, or they are not, we can say, containing mature pollen grain. So self-pollination is once again avoided, cross-pollination becomes the rule. The most common example you can have gloriosa, where protogyny is there. Then we can have the prepotency. Now what is prepotency? Pollen grains of other flower germinate rapidly over the stigma than the pollen grains of same flower. So androecium, gynoecium of the flower mature at the same time, but the pollen grains of the same flower, as you can see here, it is shown by S1, S2, S1, S2. The S1, they are, we can say, rapidly germinating as they belongs to the different flower or different plant, and these S, we can have this example of another pollen grain which is not rapidly germinating like this. Here they belongs to the same flower, same, we can say, plant. They are not germinating rapidly, whereas these are the pollen grain rapidly germinating. So there is a favor for one pollen grain to germinate and prevent the other pollen grain for germination. The most common it is found in plants like apple. Then another example of these contrivances is heterostyly, or it is called as heteromorphy. In some plants like primula, primrose, evening primrose, there are 2 or 3 forms of flower, in which stigma and anthers are placed at different levels. So physical distance is created. As a result of that, we can call them as heterostyly, or we call them as heteroanthy. Here in the flower you can see the androecium are very long, the gynoecium is short, or opposite to that, the androeciums are very short, the gynoecium is long, creating a physical distance between them, preventing the self-pollination. This prevents the pollen grain from reaching the stigma and pollinating it. In heteromorphic flower, pollen grains are produced from anther. They pollinate the stigma produced at the same level, which is not present, or which is not possible here in this heteromorphy, heterostyly, or heteroanthy. Another example, of contrivance we can have hercogamy. It is a mechanical device which prevents cell pollination. In plants, natural physical barrier is present between two sex organs and avoid contact of the pollen with the stigma of the same flower. Here once again you can have, this is called as approach hercogamy, where the androeciums are very short and the gynoecium is very long. The reverse hercogamy is there, where the androeciums are very tall but the gynoecium is not. And when hercogamy is absent, both androecium and gynoecium, they are placed at the same level. If absence of hercogamy is there, cell pollination will result, but reverse hercogamy or approach hercogamy, definitely they will support the cross pollination. We can have common example in the form of Calotropis plant, a very common plant. It is pentagonal stigma is there. Here you can see the stigma is pentagonal and it is positioned just above the anthers. And this condition is called as pollinia, the pentagonal stigma pollinia. Then self-incompatibility, or it is called as self-sterility, represent another contrivance for one type of pollination, cross-pollination. This is a genetic mechanism due to which germination of pollen grain on the stigma of same flower is inhibited due to presence of certain biochemical agents. The pollen grains of the same flower, they are prevented from germination, and pollen grain from other flower, they are facilitated for we can say germination. The most commonly you can have tobacco plant as well as Thea sinensis, the tea plant, they are the example of self-incompatibility or self-sterility. So these are the contrivances for cross-pollination, avoid cell pollination, support or facilitate cross-pollination. Friends, this is what we can say about the pollination in angiosperm. If you find these videos helpful for your preparation, you please subscribe to the channel Anand Joshi Biology, Facts in Biology. Subscribe, like and share. Thank you. Thank you very much.